You're listening to the Grow Wire podcast. I'm your host, Fritz Nelson, and I'm glad you tuned in today because we're going to be talking to a 2020 presidential candidate, Kirsten Gillibrand. She is the United States Senator from New York, serving since 2009, and before that, she represented New York's 20th District in the House of Representatives. We have more female candidates running for president in 2020 than ever before, but just to punctuate how far we finally come on that score, Gillibrand actually dreamt of being a senator since childhood. You're going to hear why and about some of the people who inspired that drive. We also talk about the state of the economy, especially as it relates to business. And then we dive into some of the issues that Gillibrand cares about and has made the pillars of her 2020 campaign. I was particularly interested in how she's going to handle the inevitably fiery debates, and the timing of that is pretty perfect since her party's debates began this month. All right, let's get to it.
You're listening to the Grow Wire podcast, a place where you will learn the ins and outs of growing a business, running a business, or even taking your big idea, career, or personal development to the next level. It's all possible. Our host, Fritz Nelson, the editor-in-chief of GrowWire.com, will take you on an exploration of growth through candid conversations with some of the most brilliant minds in entrepreneurship, entertainment, business development, and more. Whatever your goal, we know you'll walk away with the right tools to help fuel your journey of growth.
All right, welcome to sunny California. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I want to take it back to Kirsten Gillibrand as a kid, a young adult. What's the earliest point in your life that you can remember seeing yourself becoming a politician? Was there an epiphany, a moment?
I think it was watching my grandmother love politics and being so engaged by organizing campaigns for candidates that she valued. I remember at about the age of 7 or 8 that me, my sister, and my cousin were sitting in my cousin's basement talking about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And my sister said she wanted to be an actress, and she did become an actor. My cousin said that she wanted to become a flight attendant. She did not become a flight attendant. And I said I wanted to be a senator. And I did not know what a senator was, but I knew it was somebody who had big ideas and helped people and was in public service. And so that was really the first time I ever said out loud that I wanted to do public service for my career.
So see, say it out loud, it will come true. Who have been some of your mentors and inspirations along the way?
Well, my grandmother was my first role model in politics. She was a woman who never went to college. She was a woman who worked every day of her life. She was a secretary in our state legislature, and she figured out some 75 years ago that a lot of women didn't have a voice in politics. So few women were elected, and that she believed that if women could be heard, outcomes would be different. So she organized women in the legislature and in her community. They formed the Women's Democratic Club. And over 50 years, they actually became powerful. You couldn't get elected in Albany without the blessing of my grandmother and her lady friends. So I grew up watching her work on campaigns every fall and going into campaign headquarters with her and having this amazing experience of seeing her be larger than life and knowing that her voice really mattered. And it left me with that life lesson that women's voices matter and what you do with your time matters and grassroots advocacy matters. And it made me want to be in public life.
That's great. You've also been described as resilient, a person who doesn't let setbacks bring you down. Where do you think that comes from?
I think that also comes from my grandmother and my mother. My mother was a bit of a trailblazer, too. She was one of only 3 women in her law school class. So she didn't let gender norms define her. She could do what she wanted. My mom, by the time she was my age, was a second-degree black belt in karate. Whoa. So she was definitely doing things that other moms weren't doing. And my mom was somebody who, of course, she cooks the Thanksgiving turkey, but she also liked to shoot the Thanksgiving turkey.
Whoa.
So she was a different kind of mom. And she gave me a boldness and a bit of courage to be who I wanted to be and to dare to be different.
So you were also a college tennis player, and I hear you're still pretty good. So my question is there anyone in the Senate or Congress that you think could beat you?
Thinking. No.
No? Okay. I like that. competitive too.
Maybe. So the couple other senators I played with, I think we're about the same. I think Tom Udall's pretty good. I think we'd have a very close match. And so is Shelley Moore Capito. I think all three of us are about the same level. So I think we'd have a good match.
Gotcha. Okay. So like in the Obama era, there was the basketball games. You might get some tennis tournaments going.
Yeah, I would love to. It's fun. I like exercise. It keeps me calm and focused and sane. So I really like spending time doing something athletic every day.
That's great. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about something that we talk about at GrowWire a lot, which is the impact of small businesses. So some stats here. They make up 99.9% of U.S. businesses, according to the Small Business Administration in 2018. Almost half of U.S. employees, 44% of U.S. economic activity, at least as measured through 2014, but that is in a decline. What do we need to do to encourage growth in this important sector?
I think the most important thing to recognize about small businesses is they're a huge economic engine. 2/3 of all new jobs are created by small businesses. And as I've traveled the country, the problem that a lot of small businesses are often the same. It's access to capital, just having the ability to get a loan or to get financing to start their business or get it to the next stage. And so I've been working over the last decade on trying to change how businesses can get money. And so I think one way is to make the Small Business Administration work better for more small businesses. In the last Congress, I actually passed a piece of legislation to help baby boomers who want to sell their businesses. There's lots of them, hundreds of thousands of them across America, whose kids don't want their business. And we created a way through the SBA for them to actually sell their businesses to their employees to incentivize more employee ownership. And more employee ownership will help small businesses thrive, because when employees help own your business, they are going to innovate and be able to make good decisions about what makes their company grow. And so it helps. It creates a growing economy, and people who own their own businesses tend to earn more money. So it's a way to address income inequality. I've also focused the SBA on trying to help more women and minority-owned businesses get access to capital, to use the SBA as a clearinghouse for opportunity so that small businesses with new ideas and novel approaches that traditional lenders won't necessarily see the rhyme and the reason, the SBA can. And so really pushing them to meet the needs of funding for a lot of companies and small businesses that are left behind.
Yeah, I did some research on SBA funding for small businesses last year. And I guess every method of accessing capital is fraught with difficulties. But the one thing I heard a lot was that there was so much paperwork and so much difficulty in just trying to find there's so many programs that the SBA has. So like, which is the right one for me? Do I qualify? How do I fill out the paperwork? Is that still something you see as a barrier?
It is. The SBA needs much more technical assistance. And so the piece of legislation that I passed to help women and minority-owned businesses included money for technical assistance to help these potential business owners have the support they need to apply for the money, but also support for things like writing a business plan, getting access to lawyers who might be able to, if it's an idea that needs to be patented, to get their patents done. And so I've advocated for a number of ideas about how to make it easier for small businesses to navigate federal money, the SBA. And that's useful too, because it is hard. It's really hard. And then working with more lenders to make sure they can streamline the approach for these at-risk, at-need small businesses that are desperate for money to grow. Because if you want to see more women and minority-owned businesses, you're going to need to support them. And a lot of that time is just with the technical assistance of being a first-time business owner.
You've also seen challenges in your own state in places like Syracuse and Buffalo, with industries suffering, people leaving, challenges in the Midwest, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Iowa, where I know you've spent a lot of time recently, the Rust Belt in general, trying to create or sustain viable economies. And this had a big impact in the last presidential election. What are you hearing now as you travel in those areas? And what do these economies need?
So there's a number of challenges. A lot of people in places like Iowa are deeply underemployed. They have a stated low unemployment rate, but the truth is they're working 40 hours a week and not making enough money to provide for their kids, to pay for college, to put food on the table, to buy a home. And so there's a couple of things. One is really focus federal investment on job training to actually create a pipeline from community colleges or state schools or not-for-profits or apprenticeship programs directly into industries that have job openings. So pairing the employer with the trainer and the not-for-profit or the community college to create the exact training. I'll give you an example. In upstate New York, a manufacturer called Bombardier desperately needed advanced welders, couldn't find any within 500 miles. And so they went to the community college and said, if you offer this coursework on advanced welding, we'll hire all your graduates. And it's a $70,000 a year job. They've already trained and placed 100 workers through that approach. You can do it with technical workers too. In the Bronx, when they recognized that a lot of young people who lived in the Bronx didn't have access to STEM fields, it became something where they went to every tech company in New York City and said, what are the open jobs and what are the skills needed? And they built it. They've already placed 800 young workers into cybersecurity, coding, building and fixing computers and computer engineering jobs across New York City. And that was paid for by a not-for-profit. So the federal government makes it the ambition to deal with underemployment and fund all this training. You're going to be able to create more economic growth, higher wages, and more broad-based success. So more families can earn at their fullest hiring potential. There's other things that need to structurally change in the economy to make sure all workers can work at their fullest potential. I would include national paid leave in that, because if you have a dying parent or a sick spouse or a sick child or a new baby, and you have to quit your job just to meet that need, you're choosing between your income and your family. And that's really contrary to a growing economy and also contrary to our values. So having a national paid leave plan would make a difference. We're the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have national paid leave.
What do you think about the state of our economy, generally speaking? The talking points of today are that it's strong. We've had some economic news, even as we are recording this podcast, that it's a little bit shaky. Where would you say the strengths and weaknesses lie in general?
I think for most people in America, they don't feel the economy's working for them at all. You see it in the vast underemployment that I just talked about. But you also see it in the difficulty to start a business, the difficulty to start a family because of costs. A lot of that has to do with having too much college debt. So we have to actually deal with the college debt crisis directly by making college affordable and debt-free. I have an idea to do that. National public service. Ask young people if you're willing to do a year of public service, you can have 2 years of community college or state school for free. If you're willing to do 2 years, you can have 4 years for free. And it will create such an economic engine because you're asking young people to look at some of these public service careers. So healthcare, we need more home health aides. We have a nursing shortage across the country. Education, our teaching population is aging, making sure we have young people who are interested in becoming educators. Green jobs, if you're going to take global climate change seriously, you're going to need to inspire young people to go into these fields. Wind, solar, geothermal, hydropower, biofuels, energy efficiency, energy efficient building materials. Those kinds of training and opportunities matter. And so that would be what I would look at for national public service, all those industries, plus, of course, military and first responders. And so it's really an augmentation of the GI Bill. So I would address some of the lack of opportunity there. And then I do think you have to look at trade, because this president has really disrupted trade with his trade war with China. You've got to hold China accountable. You have to stand up to them. You have to stop their dumping, stop their currency manipulations, stop their stealing of IP. But there's a way to do that with tariffs and trade policy, but starting a trade war is not helping. So a lot of farmers in Iowa and other places around the country are really struggling. And a lot of our manufacturers are struggling because the price of steel has gone through the roof. And so when your number one input costs too much, then you can't produce what you're trying to produce at an affordable rate. So there's lots of macro issues and small issues too.
You mentioned before the notion of empowering women in business, and it's an issue we talk about and write about a lot on Grow Wire. I'm going to throw some more stats at you. Only 5% of Fortune 500 CEOs were women as of 2018. Women own 39% of small businesses in the U.S. 91% of founders of VC-backed startups are male. 91%. Women receive just 2% of venture capital dollars annually, and far fewer female founders seek VC funding than males. So how do we change this?
Well, it goes back to access to capital, and it goes to supporting women in their careers and in their ambition. I've done a lot of work on the political side, asking women to vote and become advocates and to become candidates. I've raised over $7 million just for women candidates to help them do that, and $1 million alone for women of color to change who has a seat at the table. But I believe that if you had 51% of women in Congress, a lot of these economic issues would be addressed, because we'd pass national paid leave, which keeps more women in the workplace longer and earning at their highest potential. But other infrastructure changes like affordable daycare and universal pre-K, equal pay for equal work, things that are structural that really make a difference in people's ability to reach their fullest economic potential. But, all the stats you mentioned shows that a lot of the levers of power and a lot of the sources of capital are male determined and male owned. And so they see brilliance in themselves. So you need to create more opportunities for women to get access to money to start their businesses. Women start their businesses with something like 7 times less capital than men, but their return rates are the same. I had a banker in upstate New York. She ran one of our local banks, and she believed in this notion that if women had access to capital, their businesses would thrive. So she created a fund to do lending to women-owned businesses. And she said, I just want to do $3 billion in lending. I think she's close to doubled that by now because those portfolios did so well. So just create more opportunities, at least I can through the federal government, to really use the Small Business Administration as a playing field leveler, which means they really have to be aggressive in seeking out business opportunities for women and business owners of color so that they can have a shot to create growth in our economy, because their ideas are good. They just don't have the same access to the VC money and the angel network money and the banks, because those are mostly run and most decisions are made by white men.
I want to come back to some of your statements about how in Congress, in the Senate, in politics in general, more women, how things will be different. But I want to focus that question real quickly on business. So if more women have access to capital, what benefits will changing that bring?
So it'll create a growing economy, because women don't statistically have equal pay for equal work. It's just there's biases in the system. And if you allow more women to start their own businesses, they're going to create the culture and the climate where they're going to thrive. And if they're thriving and starting businesses and hiring people, they're going to create a thriving economy. So you want to unleash the entire untapped potential of women by allowing more women to have opportunities to start businesses, to be employers. It'll change the face of the workforce, but also the quality of the workplace. And that's good for America. It will help the country thrive. And if I can pass laws like national paid leave or better equal pay laws, I can help these individual workers also thrive, which will allow their employers to thrive.
You once said about women seeking equal pay that we are the suffragists of our generation. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that and what you mean and what success really looks like?
So success for the U.S. economy is every person who wants to be working is working at their fullest economic potential. So that means making sure women have the structural support so there's no bias in the economy, equal pay for equal work, affordable daycare, universal pre-K, a higher minimum wage. 2/3 of minimum wage earners are women, and something like a national paid leave plan. If you do that suite of ideas, you're basically going to allow more women to excel in the workplace. And then if you try to level the playing field on access to capital, then again, you can create more opportunity for women-owned businesses to grow quicker and create more jobs. I think my legislation to help baby boomers sell their businesses to their employees will also help. More employee ownership makes a huge difference, because once you own your business, you can innovate, and people tend to have higher wages and better outcomes if they have a piece of the pie.
It's the stake in the game.
Yep.
Senator Gillibrand has mentioned the importance of female business owners, so we thought we'd take a quick moment here to thank our sponsors over at Hint. If you don't know about Hint yet, the brand is all about making the everyday more enjoyable. It started when Kara Golden, Hint's founder, needed a way to drink more water, but she wanted more flavor without the extra sugars or sweeteners that come in most drinks. So she created Hint Water. It has just a hint of flavor from real fruit essences without any of those added sugars or sweeteners. Everyone at the Grow Wire office is a big fan of Hint Waters. I myself like the Cabernet and Chocolate Grenache. Probably Kendall would tell me that doesn't exist either, but I like it. We'll let you figure that all out for yourself. Go to hint.co/welcome to get 30% off your first purchase. A business at which 30% of leaders are women actually can expect to see statistics show a 15% boost in profitability. Mm-hmm. So switching to politics for a minute, how would our Senate perform if it were 30% women?
It would perform better, no doubt. We already know from studies that women senators sponsor more bills and pass more bills than our male colleagues. So we are productive. The one thing that I know women are particularly good at often is finding common ground, listening, finding where we agree, and building consensus, and then passing bills from there. It's why I passed 18 bills in the last Congress alone, even though it was a Republican House, Senate, and President signing it into law, because I know how to find common ground. It's why I've passed big bills like Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal and the 9/11 health bill, but also small bills in the last Congress, like more money for rural broadband or more money for small businesses.
You once said this, I'm taking it out of context, but I'll put it back in context. You said, my presence in the Senate is meaningful because I am going to have access to different problems. And what you actually said it in response to the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because Senator McCain had said, nobody ever asks me that question. You said, they ask me. And so not just the productivity, but it sounds like you would also say the tenor of the conversation, the types of things that would get addressed would also change.
Correct.
What types of things?
So women and people of color have different life experiences that aren't really brought to bear in Congress because it's predominantly white and predominantly male. And what that means is there's a lot of issues that aren't even being addressed because they don't see them. So I'll give you paid leave as an example. Most of my colleagues didn't do child rearing or child care. Most of my colleagues have enormous amounts of money, so the cost of daycare wasn't relevant to them. Many of our colleagues, their spouses stayed at home and had as much care and support as they needed because they had very high wealth. And so I know as a young mother what it's like to choose a daycare, to bring your child to daycare, to pick your child up from daycare, to know how much that daycare costs and whether it's affordable and how good the daycare worker is. And so I know because of my life experience how important affordable quality daycare is to the life of a parent who has a child, because you need to know that from 9 to 5, that child is thriving, learning, having fun without you, or you can't be effective in your job. And so I know this because I lived it. A lot of my male colleagues haven't lived it, don't perceive it, didn't even know it was an issue. I remember when I first introduced my national paid leave bill, one of my progressive male colleagues said, I just don't see why this is a priority. And I thought immediately, well, it's not a priority for you because your wife did all the child care and you don't know how much child care is, and you've always had a lot of money. So even among Democrats, if they haven't lived it, they won't know why it matters. And that happens in everything. I mean, it happens with any of the issues we just talked about today, about why it's so important, because we see things differently, and also our constituents will raise different issues with us.
And that's what you meant by access to different problems.
Exactly.
For the 2020 election, and we're getting ready to head into some debates here coming up, there are 4, maybe 5 female candidates on the Democratic side, more than ever. So just in terms of the primary process, having more women at the table, how does that change the conversation?
I think we will have opinions about things that are very deeply held and strongly held, and we'll set the stage for the debate. I've already led on a half dozen issues that because I've led on, many people have followed. For example, I was the first to say that I wouldn't appoint a judge or a justice who doesn't believe that Roe v. Wade is settled precedent. Once I did that, several candidates have followed and said they would do the same. I said I would codify Roe v. Wade, which means to make it the law of the land. I said I would repeal the Hyde Amendment, which means low-income women should have access to abortion services through Medicare and Medicaid. I said I would guarantee it in all 50 states, that there'd be resources so a woman can get an abortion if she needs it, no matter where she lives. Many candidates have since followed. So the truth is, having women on that debate stage might mean that different issues are debated. It might mean that the American people can see what leadership looks like in many forms. It doesn't have to be white. It doesn't have to be male. It can be everything. And they'll get to see different visions for this country that are more broad-based, that we actually are speaking out and talking about issues that perhaps other candidates aren't. I just unveiled a Family Bill of Rights, which is a comprehensive approach to the struggles and challenges that people face every day wanting to have children or having children and addressing them directly. And it's comprehensive and it's well thought out, and a lot of it's already bipartisan. It's a culmination of things I've been working on for a decade. So I know what a Family Bill of Rights should look like. I don't need to read it in a book. I don't need to research it. I know. I've been working on it for families in New York for 10 years.
So, and I want to come back to that, but I also want to know just kind of this time around versus 4 years ago when it was mostly Hillary Clinton. I think Elizabeth Warren was in it for a while, but not very long. So it was just her. What do you think is going to be different about this class of Democratic candidates and the tenor of the conversation compared to 4 years ago?
Well, I think it's really additive at this point. I believe the candidates running are pretty exciting, and they all have different experience, different vision, different reasons why they're running. And I think it makes our party stronger to have a diverse and robust primary. I love the fact that we have 6 women running for president. It shows the American people and the world what female leadership looks like in many forms. Again, different backgrounds, different priorities, different vision. And that's exciting to me. I think this process is not just a choice between 1 or 2 candidates. It's a choice between 20 plus candidates. And I think every one of us has a story to tell. Mine's unique.
What's unique about your story?
So among the blue state Democrats that are running, I'm the only one who's won regularly in red and purple areas. My first congressional campaign was in a 2-1 Republican district. And I won that district twice, the second time by a 24-point margin. I've not lost those 10 counties since, and I've actually won them with a higher margin than then. And I have the highest vote threshold in the history of the state at 72%. And that's higher than President Obama earned, higher than Hillary Clinton earned, higher than any person who's ever run for Senate or governor ever. And so I bring the red, purple, and blue states together. And then I also pass a lot of bipartisan legislation because I know how to reach across the aisle, find common ground, and then get it done.
You've talked a lot about your relationships with some of the big Republicans in the Senate. How have you managed to work on these deals to go across the aisle and make them your allies in some of your endeavors?
Well, you just spend a little time talking to them about what they care about and what they want to accomplish. And then you find the common ground where you can and then pass a bill. So one bill we just passed was the bill I started working on with Ted Cruz because he and I both agreed that the way sexual harassment was dealt with in Congress was wrong. It was making survivors wait 3 months before they could even report. Mandatory counseling, mandatory arbitration, mandatory cooling off. I mean, absurd. And so we found this good bipartisan solution, and we got something like 30 co-sponsors on it, and eventually pushed Senator McConnell to allow a vote. And the bill that was ultimately voted on had the entire base of what Senator Cruz and I worked on, and it ultimately passed unanimously. So you just work with everybody, and you figure out what do we agree on and what can we do, and then build from there.
You make it sound so simple.
It is. It starts with listening and starts with understanding like there's commonality for all of us. I'm working right now on clean water issues with Shelley Moore Capito. We both have this issue of PFOA and PFAS pollution in our states. We both understand that we need to clean up these military bases that are polluting groundwater. We know that there's legacy manufacturing problems in her state of West Virginia and my state of New York. So it's common ground, and it doesn't matter if it's Democratic or Republican. It's just a good idea. And so we're working on it, and hopefully we can push the president and his party to actually clean up groundwater so people can turn on their faucets and know that the water's clean.
So what do you think is the most important problem to be solved for the next president, no matter who it is?
Global climate change. I think the greatest threat to humanity right now is global climate change. We saw it in California with your droughts, with your wildfires, people dying. I just saw it in Iowa with massive flooding, with farms getting devastated and crushed, people losing their lives. I see it in New York with flooding as well. These 100-year floods, 200-year floods coming every 3-4 years. It's changing. The climate is changing, and we have severe weather. So I will lead on this issue. I will restore our moral leadership in the world by rejoining the Paris Global Climate Accords and leading those accords and pushing our allies to do more. I will pass a Green New Deal because most of it's bipartisan. It's infrastructure, green jobs, and clean air and clean water, all of which I've been working on for a decade. The goal of net zero carbon emissions in 10 years is hard to achieve, but it's a great organizing principle. When John F. Kennedy said, I want to put a man on the moon in 10 years, he didn't know if he could get a man on the moon in 10 years. He just knew it was a great organizing principle, that it would be a measure of our efficiency and our effectiveness and our entrepreneurialism and our innovation. Why not create a space race about green energy, but with China? Why not say, we want to outcompete you and the rest of the globe on who gets to a green economy first and who's the one who figures out the best technology for wind, solar, geothermal, hydropower, or biofuels? And why not create a world competition to, again, elevate the issue, use the bully pulpit, use your stature to make every kid in America want to solve these problems and every scientist and engineer start working on them. That's exciting as a measure of our innovation, our measure of our entrepreneurship.
You talked also earlier about the Family Bill of Rights, and I wanted to just kind of dive into that a little bit. I think you kind of put it out there on a Medium post and went into some of the details of it. Do you view all of those issues as bipartisan issues?
Yeah. The only one that's not quite yet is national paid leave, but what is bipartisan is the idea of it. Trump wants paid leave, so does several Republican senators. We're just not in agreement yet on how. They want women and men to draw down from their Social Security. I don't think that's the right approach. I think investing like Social Security is the right approach. Having people buy in at $2 a week into a fund just like Social Security to have this social insurance is the way. So we're very close to the common ground because we both believe it can be a social safety net that we buy into as social insurance. So I'm optimistic that through advocacy, that's the last piece that can be bipartisan. But the earlier stuff, most of it is. We want to make sure people have a healthy pregnancy and can be pregnant or be parents if they want to be. So that's dealing with maternal mortality, the racism in our healthcare system that allows Black women to have a maternal mortality rate of 4 times that of white women. But our maternal mortality rate overall is the highest of all industrialized country. We're the worst. So that is something that we can do on a bipartisan basis, making sure LGBTQ community members can adopt, making sure that you can get IVF and fertility treatments, no matter who your insurer is, and making sure that rural health is available. A lot of rural areas like Iowa, they don't have OBGYNs where they need them or obstetrics where they need them. So we need to incentivize that. And then making sure when you bring that baby home, that baby's safe. We want to have baby bundles where new parent gets to bring home a box of goodies, a car carrier, formula, diapers, swaddling cloth, all in a box that can be actually used as a crib. That's a baby bundle. And we know from studies in Finland and studies in about 4 or 5 states that it actually works. It saves children's lives from sudden infant death syndrome. And then the third point is national paid leave to make sure parents can be with their children in those first few months and not lose their spot at a job and still be able to provide for their families, pay their mortgage, pay their rent. Fourth, universal pre-K and affordable daycare, actually making sure our kids get access to early childhood learning and making it affordable. That's the comprehensive approach we have to making sure that families can thrive in that first few months of life.
You talked earlier about, like, for example, daycare, how some of your male colleagues, just have no conception of this sort of thing. But I feel like when I read about the baby bundle thing, that idea of having just the basics for the first month was a surprise to me. The fact that we had such infant mortality rate among industrialized countries was surprising. Do you think you need to raise awareness of these issues as well?
You do, because not everybody realizes it. If you're pregnant in a rural area, you know that you have to drive 40 miles to get to an OBGYN, and you know that's a real problem because if you're about to give birth, you don't want to have to deliver that baby in the back of a car. So women will know this, but not everyone knows this. And so these are the things that would allow families to thrive. And that's why I'm making them part of my presidential platform. It's why it matters that women are running for president.
So the first debates are coming up pretty soon. Amongst Democrats, how do you debate without mudslinging? We saw a lot of that during the last set of primaries and the debates.
For my part, I intend to talk about my vision and my experience and how I'm going to beat Trump. And each candidate will make their own judgments about how they're going to comport themselves on that debate stage. But I hope your listeners like what they heard, and I hope they'll help me get to the debate stage, because right now I've qualified because I have 1% in several polls. But to guarantee the spot, I need more online donors. So I hope your supporters will send in $1 to KirstenGillibrand.com so I can actually guarantee that spot. To make it to the next debate stage in September, I need double the amount of supporters I have now. So I really have a long way to go, and I'd love people's support.
You heard where you can help. I want to end with a few quick other questions that are kind of some political, some just kind of fun. You've been really big on transparency. So what is the importance of transparency, not just in a government role, but in a leadership role, say at a business or in life in general?
Voters have a right to know what their politicians and their elected leaders are doing. So when I first got elected, posted my earmark requests, my financial disclosure, posted my meetings, so my constituents would know what I was doing, who I was working with on what issues. And I think that kind of radical transparency matters. I was the first presidential candidate to post all of my taxes for the 12 years I've been in public service, led on that issue. I think our country's desperate for transparency on this issue with the Mueller report. The fact that we still don't have an unredacted version of that report, the fact that President Trump is obstructing justice every day, not allowing McGahn or Barr to testify, is an outrage. And now that we've heard from Mueller that his testimony is the report itself, we have a right to the full report. And I think the House might need to begin impeachment proceedings just to get the facts. We have a right to that information and to have transparency. You
have also been spending a lot of time in Iowa, I noticed. So what are some fun things to do in Iowa? Well,
Henry and I was just in Iowa, my 11-year-old, and we got a really good game of cornhole going. And Henry tried to one-up me, and so he turned around and he threw the bag over his head, backwards, and it actually landed in the cornhole. It's on my Instagram page, so please follow me on Instagram and see Henry's amazing performance. But it's fun. We love being there, talking to caucus goers about their concerns. We're going to actually rent an RV this summer and tour around Iowa to get to all the small places. I'm going to go to every rural place, every red place, every county I can find to talk to voters about what they care about, because that's what a presidential campaign is all about.
What's been maybe the most inspiring moment or interaction that sticks out for you so far in this campaign?
I have to say I've met so many little girls, and when they come up to you and want to ask a question and have an important policy request that they want to know what you believe in, that's inspiring to me, because these young girls, they know that their voice matters, and they know that this process is for them too. And that's when our democracy works, when regular people know that their voice matters, when they're willing to fight for it, when they're willing to be heard. That's when we elect candidates that share our values, and that's when our democracy works best.
And how do you get downtime on a campaign? how do you blow off steam?
I like to work out at 6 a.m. This morning I did weights in my hotel room. I tried to go to a Pilates class this morning, but we showed up and the instructor didn't. So I wasted 15 minutes. I was really upset. But I went back to my hotel and just worked out in the gym. But while we're on the trail, we go to local exercise studios, often women-owned businesses. We do a biking class or a yoga class or a Pilates class, and we get to know the local business owners as well as other women who are working out.
Great. Well, we wish you the best of success on this campaign, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Take care.
No matter what your view is on politics, there's one thing I think we can agree on. We need a more diverse government for our economy, for human rights, for our future, and as Gillibrand explained, for a better America. Thank you so much to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand for joining us on this episode of the Grow Wire podcast. I also want to thank our editors over at Lampstand and our producer, Kendall Fisher, and all of you, our listeners, for tuning in. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.
You just listened to the Grow Wire podcast with host Fritz Nelson. Make sure to keep tuning in for more episodes full of tips, tools, stories, and strategies to help take your personal and professional growth to the next level. Until next time.